Hey everybody, it's Scott and welcome to this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. This week we're going to look at some of my favorite mobility and flexibility drills that I like to do. I kind of refer to these as my daily dozen. I think flexibility and mobility is an important part of any health, fitness, and strength training program, and these are the ones that I've just had a lot of benefit with. By no means am I saying that these are the be-all end-all of stretching and mobility. If you have other exercises that work for you, that's great. I just wanted to share my 12 favorites and how I do them on a daily basis to help supplement my fitness training, my martial art training, my strength training routines. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it. Like I said, this just ended up being about 12 of my favorite exercises that I do, and I try to do these daily regardless if I'm training heavy that day or not. I generally do these as a warm-up and preparation before doing some of my martial art practice, some of my Tai Chi training, or even before I do Qigong. Sometimes I just do these, I might only have about 10 or 15 minutes, so I might just do these as a GPP exercise or a GPP workout in and of itself. So again, there's 12 exercises. I usually start at the top and work my way down to the ground ones and then finish with the last couple that are standing exercises. Now, as far as sets and reps and things like that go, I really don't do a lot of counting. Just for general recommendations and purposes, I try to do the mobility exercises for at least 12 repetitions, and the stretches I hold for 12 breath cycles. I got away from counting seconds or saying, okay, I'm going to hold this stretch for 30 counts, because I find that I just count really fast, or I don't pay attention, or I might start thinking about something else and kind of forget where I am. So I really try to, when I'm doing static stretching, I really try to focus on the breath cycle. So that ensures that I'm taking a deep breath and really, kind of forcing the relaxation and getting more benefit out of the stretching exercises. So again, minimum recommendations on the mobility exercises, minimum of 12 repetitions. On the stretching exercises, minimum of 12 breath cycles. And that's deep breaths into the lower abdomen, letting the body relax, taking a nice, big, deep, full breath. So that's a good place to start. Again, there are days where I might do, 100 repetitions of each. I really feel that this stuff you can't overdo. Now, like I said, by no means am I saying these are the be-all, end-all, the only exercises that you should do for mobility or flexibility. Again, if you've got ones that work for you, do them. These are just 12 of my favorites and the ones that I try to do on a daily basis. All right? So the first one that I focus on is the three-plane neck exercise. This is a mobility exercise. Again, I'm going to do about 12 at minimum of 12 repetitions when I'm doing this in my fitness training program. But for today, we'll probably just do a few repetitions in each plane so that we can get through the instructional part of this video. So the first plane with the neck, we're going to raise the chin up and down, focusing on lengthening the neck as you're doing it. Now for these mobility exercises, you want to make sure that you're moving in a fairly quick but controlled pace. It's not super slow and static like you're going to do for some stretches. One of the things that I recommend when you're doing mobility exercises is that if you start to experience pain in a joint, that you never exceed a 3 out of 10 on a pain. So if we're looking at 1 to 10 being a pain scale, 10 is just unbearable pain, you never want to really exceed about a 3 when you're doing joint mobility. So that's very, very little pain. If you're finding that you have pain when you're doing a joint mobility exercise, cut the range of motion a little bit and only work through the range of motion where there's little to no pain. Okay, so again, the three-plane neck drill starts out with raising the chin up and down. And then we move on to side-to-side lateral flexions, like you're trying to touch your ear to your shoulder. So this is the second of the three planes. So we got chin up and down, so flexion and extension. Then we got side-to-side, ear to shoulder for lateral flexion. And then we've got rotation. We're just going to twist the head side-to-side for the third plane, trying to look back over each shoulder. So again, this is the three-plane neck drill. It's the first of my daily dozen. After this one, I move on to shoulder rotations. These are just basic shoulder circles to the front and back. When I do these, I like to lead with my thumbs so that I'm opening the shoulder and closing the shoulder as I'm circling to the front. Again, we're going to shoot for a minimum of 12 repetitions, but you really can't overdo these. And then when we reverse, again, we lead with the thumb so the shoulder opens and closes. Again, a minimum of 12 repetitions in each direction. So this is the second of my daily dozen mobility and flexibility exercises. The third one is, I call this the wrist, elbow, shoulder stretch. Basically, you're going to start by opening up your hands and reaching your palms out in front of your chest or your belly, stretching your fingers back toward your forearms. From here, you're going to curl your fingers into a fist, and you're going to turn your palms up reaching back behind your back, and then you're going to push your arms all the way out straight so that the backs of the hands face each other, and then circle the hands back around to the front, opening them up. So you squeeze fists, rotate the palms up, bend the elbows, push the hands back behind the body so the backs of the hands face each other, extend the elbows, and then swing your arms back to the front, again opening the fingers and repeating. So open, close the fingers, turn the palms up, bend the elbows, stretch back, backs of the hands face each other behind the body, circle them back around to the front, and then open up for the next cycle. So that's the third exercise in my daily dozen. The fourth is hip rotations. So this you're going to take a slightly wider than shoulder width stance, and yes, this is the corny hula hoop hip rotation. You're going to put your hands on your hips or in your lower back. Sometimes I like to reach back by my kidneys, and what we're going to do is just circle the hips in one direction. If you notice, you want to try to keep the head in line with the midline of the body. It's just the hips that we're trying to displace in a circular pattern. And then after we get a minimum of 12 in one direction, we go to the other direction, always doing both sides. Again, 12 is just a minimum recommendation. You can do lots and lots of repetitions of this, particularly if you have hip mobility issues, if your hips are stiff. It's sometimes good to do a little bit more. All right, so after the hip rotations, we move on to the knee rotations. Now with the knee rotation, one of the things that I like to do, and I learned this from my Tai Chi and my Qigong teacher, is we look for these little indents below the kneecap on each side of the patella tendon, and we're going to stick our first two fingers into those and kind of massage into those areas. Then we're going to take the rest of the fingers around the kneecap and find grooves around the kneecap and continue to massage. This just brings a little more blood flow and circulation to the knee joint as we do our knee rotations. And for the knee rotations, I like to circle the knees inward, then I like to circle the knees outward. Again, a minimum of 12 in each direction. And then I finish up by bringing my feet together and I circle around to the left for a minimum of 12. And then I circle to the right for a minimum of 12. Again, you're welcome to do more than 12 reps, especially if you've got stiff and achy knees. So that's the fifth exercise in my daily dozen. Then I move on to the ankles. For the ankles, I simply raise one foot up onto the ball of the foot or the toes, and then I just circle that ankle around for a minimum of 12 repetitions in one direction, and then reverse, minimum of 12 repetitions in the other direction. And then obviously move on to the other leg for 12 in one direction, and then 12 in the opposite direction. So the ankles are the sixth exercise in my daily dozen, joint mobility and flexibility. Then we're going to take it down to the ground. We're going to do our cat-camel spine stretches. For this, you're going to get on all fours. You want your arms vertical to the ground, your thighs vertical to the ground, and then you're just going to flex and extend your spine, kind of like a cat stretching. You're going to arch so that your tailbone and your head go up, and then you're going to round your spine so that your head and your tailbone go down. As you're doing this, you want to think about lengthening your spine, making C's in both directions. Good, so that's the seventh exercise in the daily dozen, joint mobility and flexibility. Before we move on to some of the static stretching exercises, I want to make a comment about breathing during mobility. Just make sure you're not holding your breath when you're doing any of these exercises. For some exercises, you might find that, matching a breathing pattern, like with the cat-camel, I like to inhale as I arch my back up, and then I like to exhale as I round my back. Just whatever works for you. Just make sure you're not holding your breath and that you're breathing at in a relaxed, controlled pace. So the cat-camel spine stretches are the seventh exercise in my daily dozen, joint mobility and flexibility. Now we're going to move on to some of the more static stretches. The first one that I like to move to after the cat-camel spine stretch is the kneeling hip flexor and quad stretch. For this, you're going to be down on one knee. You're going to put the other leg out in front. We're going to reach back and we're going to grab the lower shin or the ankle of the leg that's to the back, and we're going to pull that foot up toward the hip. That's going to put a big stretch on the quad. Once we get the quad stretch, we're going to deepen the stretch by pushing the hips forward while pulling the chest and the shoulder back. So this is going to bring the stretch even further up the quad into the hip flexor and even into the lower abdomen area. So you're going to reach back, grab that lower shin, that ankle area of the foot, and pull it up to the hip. The other leg's going to be out in front. The foot's going to be out in front. We're going to shift the hips forward while pulling the chest and the shoulders back and really pulling on that foot. You'll feel a big stretch in the quad and up into the hip flexor. For this stretch, you want to make sure that you do a minimum of 12 deep breath cycles where you're breathing into the lower abdomen, real deep, and then gently exhaling and relaxing. You'll find that the muscle releases and relaxes a lot faster when you follow that breathing pattern. And obviously after a minimum of 12 breath cycles on one side, we're going to go to the other leg. Again, the foot's out in front of the body for the leg that you're lunging on. You're going to reach back and grab the lower shin, the ankle area on that back leg, and pull that foot up toward the hip. Then you're going to push the hips forward while pulling the shoulders and the chest back. Again, breathing deep into the belly for a minimum of 12 breath cycles for this stretch. Kneeling hip flexor and quad stretch is the 8th exercise in my daily dozen. Joint mobility and flexibility. After this one, we move on to the outer hip. If you do yoga, you might know this as the pigeon stretch. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to get into a push-up position, and you're going to curl up one leg underneath your body. You're going to make kind of a V with an inverted V with that leg. So you get into a push-up position, bring that leg underneath so that if we're doing the right leg, the hip is bent, the knee's flexed, and you're making kind of a V underneath the body with the knee up near the chest, all right? So the foot's going to be out to the side of the left hip, and you want to square your hips up so that you're not leaning to the side that you're stretching. You want to square your hips up so everything's face front, and then drop down onto the forearms and the elbows. And if you've got the flexibility, at this point you should be feeling it in the outer hip. On this one it's the right leg, so you feel it in the right outer hip and the outer glute area. If you've got the flexibility, go ahead and stretch your arms out further in front of you, and you'll find that that deepens the stretch. Again, you want to hold this one for minimum 12 deep breath cycles into the lower abdomen, and then you're going to switch sides. So then you're going to bring the other leg under, stretch the other leg back, pointing the toes, and then sink down on that hip. Remember, it's important that you don't roll to the side that you're stretching, that you keep your hips squared up to the front. And if you've got the flexibility, you can reach forward to deepen the stretch. And again, a minimum of 12 long, deep breath cycles for that outer hip stretch, which is the 9th exercise in my daily dozen. So after this one, we're going to move on to the hamstring. There's a lot of ways to stretch your hamstring. One of my favorites is the standing stretch. And what you're going to do is you're going to extend the leg straight that you're going to be stretching. So in this case, I'm straightening out my left leg, putting it on the heel, pulling the toes back toward the shin, keeping the knee straight. Now what I'm going to do is start by squatting down on my right leg and folding at my hips. So I'm not really rounding my back, I'm folding at my hips, and that's already placing a great stretch into the hamstring and even down into the calf. Then from here, I'm just going to work my way down the leg, deepening the stretch again, breathing deep into the lower abdomen for about 12 breath cycles. And I just work my way down the leg until I can grab the foot and really pull, folding at the hips to increase that stretch. So this is stretching out the hamstring and the back of the leg. Then after a minimum of 12 deep breath cycles, we're going to go to the other leg. Again, we're going to straighten out that leg, resting it on the heel, pulling the toe back toward the shins. Then from here, we're going to squat down on the back leg, folding at the hips, working our way down from the thigh to the knee to the shin, all the way down to the toes. Again, folding at the hips, not rounding the back as much, breathing deep into the lower abdomen for a minimum of 12 breath cycles to stretch out the hamstrings. So the standing hamstring stretch is the 10th exercise in my daily dozen. Joint mobility and stretching exercises. After this one, I move on to a combination of a Cossack stretch and a bodyweight squat. I think one of the healthiest things that we can do is full, deep squatting, hamstrings all the way down to the calves with the foot completely flat on the ground. So that heel's got to be down. We can't be up on the toes. If you do this, this shows that you got really good mobility around the hips, the knees, the ankles, and that you've got some good flexibility in your Achilles tendon. So to do this stretch, we start out with the Cossack stretch, and we're going to squat down on one leg. It's almost like a side lunge while the other leg stays straight. Again, when we're doing these squatting exercises, we want to make sure that the heel stays down, that you're not rolling up onto the ball of the foot. So we're going to squat down, flat foot here, and with my straightened leg with that foot rolled over so that it's flat on the ground, I've got a big stretch going on in my inner thigh right now, even down into the inside of the knee. I feel a big stretch in the calf and the Achilles on the leg that I'm sitting on. And then I can change the emphasis of the stretch by rolling this leg over so that the toe points up. I'm going to bring that stretch a little bit more from the inside of the leg down into the hamstring. Then I can even reach over and grab that foot to deepen the stretch. And what I do is I kind of roll my hips around like that periodically while I'm doing these stretches. Again, because I'm going to maintain this position for about 12 breath cycles. And then from here, we're just going to shift our weight over to the left leg. So we're going to stand up off this leg, bending the left leg, shifting the hips over, and we're going to work our way down so that we're squatting on the left leg. Again, that heel's down. So the right leg's out straight now. When that foot's rolled over, I'm going to have a greater stretch on the inside of the leg. Then I can roll that leg up so the toes point up and shift the emphasis to the hamstring. I can reach out and grab that foot to deepen the stretch again. Whatever I want to do for a minimum of 12 deep, slow breath cycles, again in the lower abdomen. Sometimes I just like to rock back and forth. Each breath, that's a great variation as well. This allows you to build some strength through range of motion. So that's a great way to do the Cossack stretches. Then after the Cossack, I like to finish with a deep body weight squat where I'm sitting down, hamstrings on the calves, my feet, my heels are flat on the ground. Sometimes I'll take my elbows and I'll push into the knees to really open up the hips. And I might pry side to side a little bit or shift my weight around a little and really sink down deep into this deep full squat position. Again, I think full deep squats, body weight squats like this are some of the healthiest things we can do. Sometimes I'll do some reps where I'll just stand up and I'll squat back down. I might pry a little bit, work some mobility while I'm down there, but that's how I always finish my Cossack stretch series, which is the 11th exercise in my daily dozen. And then after the Cossack and the squat stretches, I go to hip, waist, torso twisting, as well as some tapping on the body. This is to help loosen up the hips, the lumbar, thoracic spine, the neck. We're just kind of twisting the spine all the way up from the hips, the tailbone up. As we do this, we swing our arms gently, letting them tap at the lower back, kind of near the kidneys and the adrenals, and the lower belly area, as well as up at the chest area, as well as up at the shoulders and the top of the shoulders. So I just kind of swing my arms and tap. We do this a lot in Qigong and my Tai Chi training. It's a great way to loosen up the spine. It's a great way to stimulate energy and blood flow as well. So you're just going to stand with your feet about shoulder width apart and swinging gently from the hips, allowing your hands to tap at the lower back and the lower abdomen areas. Then we further the rotation and we twist a little bit further to each side as the spine begins to loosen up and the front hand comes up to the chest. And at this point, as the spine's loosening up, we're looking even further behind the shoulders. We're going to tap up at the top of the shoulder with the front hand as that back hand's hitting at the kidney, lower back area. And I just work my way back down. Again, for a minimum of 12 twists to each side, but I usually end up doing about 24 or more. This just feels great for my back. It's a great way to finish up, my stretching and mobility exercises. And again, the tapping around the body helps to stimulate blood flow and circulation and energy circulation as well. So those are my daily dozen joint mobility and flexibility exercises. Like I said, I typically do these before I begin my Tai Chi or Qigong training, my martial art training. If I'm not training that day, I will do these just on their own as a GPP workout in and of itself. Some days when I don't have a heavy training session, a heavy strength training session scheduled, I might just do these for about, really long, more reps, more sets for, 20 or 30 minutes and make it a separate workout in and of itself. But again, these by no means are the only joint mobility or flexibility exercises that you could do. These are just the ones that help me tremendously with some of my problem areas that I've developed from years of powerlifting and heavy lifting, as well as contribute to some of the movements that I have to do in my Tai Chi and martial arts training. So these are my favorite. I hope you can take one or two or all of these exercises from my daily dozen, add them to your program to see some improvements in mobility and flexibility. That's it for this week's episode of Strength and Health TV. Leave your comments below the video and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you get updates on future episodes. And until next week, stay strong and stay healthy. See you later.